There you go. So you'll need to approve that. And then I will share the recording with you tomorrow. It's on my YouTube channel, so you can watch it as many times as you want. And then the same thing with class number 2. I'll share it with you so you can record it. You can rewatch it as many times as you want to. What I'm going to do in this class is I want to teach you how to use your camera. So your Panasonic, your Canon R6. So I'm not teaching you, I'm teaching you the theory of photography, but I want you to know how to do it on your camera. So this is going to be a little bit more difficult than a real simple class where I just taught you how to use the automated mode. But all of you all are in the manual mode right now, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not manual autofocus. That's the greatest thing that's ever been made, but you're in the manual operation mode. And this is going to make you totally in charge of the camera, and you have to change everything on it. You may not always shoot this way, but people have told me for years that they're so glad that I taught them how to use the camera on manual, because now they understand the camera functions and photography functions. So we're going to learn in this class 4 basic operating or 4 components of taking a photograph, and that is your light meter, your f-stop, your shutter speed, and your ISO. This is very technical, and so bear with me, be patient, ask questions, but if you can learn which light meter you use, which f-stop, which shutter speed, and which ISO, then you can photograph anything, because that red and green macaw down in Brazil is not going to stop for you so that you can figure out whether it's your light meter that needs to be changed, or your f-stop that needs to be changed, or your shutter, or your ISO. And the same thing with the lioness. As she raises her head up, she is not going to wait for you. So you have to know when you see a scene that you want to photograph, whether it's your light meter that you need to punch and change, whether it's your f-stop, whether it's your shutter speed, or whether it's your ISO. Something as simple as the Milky Way out in Big Bend National Park. It's a very simple photograph, but you have to know which one's the most important: light meter, f-stop, shutter speed, or ISO. So in every single photograph, from the very simple one of the kids across the table doing something cute to something a little bit more complex and a little bit more creative, you've got to know whether it's light meter, f-stop, shutter speed, or ISO. And once you learn that, you can do the solar eclipse in a couple of years, no problem at all with that. You can do the Aurora Borealis in Norway. I've got a trip going for that, and hopefully, keep fingers crossed, we can travel in September. Or if you want to do something creative and silly like crystal ball photography, I've got a class in that next week. And it's wonderful when you start looking at the world through a crystal ball. But you've got to know, from something as simple as your cat to something as complex as fast moving objects, you've got to know whether it's your light meter that's the most important thing, your f-stop, your shutter speed, or your ISO. So those are the 4 building blocks of all photography. So that's what we're going to work on today. And then in your homework, you're going to work on those. And then when we come back next week, we'll talk about your homework. We'll talk about tripods, lenses, and that type of stuff, and using your flash. So that's the stuff we're going to cover in this class. So first of all, just some little stuff on the back of your camera. Clarissa, you mentioned that you didn't know where your diopter was, and it might be hard to find on your camera, and you may not even have one on your camera. But Pat and John, I know you all do. So right here is a little tiny either lever or dial right next to your viewfinder. And what you are doing with that is you are setting your camera, the view through the viewfinder, for your eye prescription. So if you wear contacts or you wear glasses, or even if you don't wear contacts or glasses, that little bitty dial or that little bitty lever sets your camera's viewfinder for your eye prescription. And the way you do it is you look through the viewfinder, you push your shutter button halfway down to turn on the lights inside the camera, and then you look at all the numbers inside the viewfinder, and you rotate that little dial until they are clear for your eyes. You hand me your camera, I don't have the same eye prescription, and so I'm not going to be able to see through your viewfinder. So if you hand your camera to somebody else and they say, I can't see, or it's not clear, it's because it hasn't been set for their eye prescription. Okay, so that's what your diopter is. So when you look through that viewfinder, those numbers and those dials down in the bottom of your viewfinder should be perfectly clear for you. Everybody got that one? Okay. And then also, we do not use the screen folded out. So a lot of the small little point and shoot cameras, you fold out the screen like this and you look at the screen like this. But even on your small camera, Clarissa, we're not going to do that. We're going to flip that around and fold it back. If you're trying to hold the camera out like this and you're trying to look over at that side folded out panel, then you're not going to aim the camera in the right direction. So we don't use our screen flipped out. We might for macro photography, we might sometimes when we're in an odd position, but otherwise we leave it flipped back in. And then your diopter, we've got that one covered. There we go. And then Clarissa, on your camera, yours looks like this, correct? Oh, excuse me, Pat, yours look like this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so yours looks like this. So this is your shutter button right here that we've got. And then on your back display panel, this is what your menu looks like, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. And then Pat, you asked me about where your light meter was, and it's this icon right here. I think you already found it. You were just looking at it. Right here.
I don't have any. Let's see. Yes, I see it.
Yeah, good. Bottom row. Okay, good. And then we'll come back to something in a little bit. Okay, that's yours. And then Pat, your top of your camera is looking like this, correct?
Correct.
Good. Okay, super. So we've got that one set up there. Remember, later on, I'm going to talk about 3 pieces of paper, and that's your 3 pieces of paper icon right there. Okay. And then Clarissa, the back of your camera looks like this, yes. Correct? And then you've got, here's your light meter, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. That's your icon for your light meter right there. And then Clarissa and John, you all are going to use this Q button right here. It's in different places on your camera, each of your different cameras, but you're going to use that Q button to activate this back panel. And then you toggle right here to move between each one of these icons. And then you push the set button, and that's how you go in there and make any changes on the back of your camera. And then John, you've got the R6. Yep. Okay. And then John, on your R6, here's your light meter button right there. So as we're talking about in just a moment, you're going to push your Q button once again, and that'll activate any of these icons right back here on this back panel. And then you can use your back dial to move around, or you can use your top dial, or you can use this joystick right here to move around on your back menu. And then John, your f-stop is changeable with your back dial right here.
Okay.
And your shutter speed is changeable with your front dial.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, good. Did everybody find your 5.6?
Yes, I did.
Good, good. And the only reason you're on 5.6 is because that's universal to all cameras. So that's there's nothing magic about it. It's just every camera gets it. So that's why I've got you on 5.6. Okay, super. So let's continue. If you're all on the M mode on the top.
Yep.
Good. Okay. Now push your button down and look through your viewfinder. Clarissa, you get to look on the back. Okay. Everybody else has to look through the viewfinder, but your camera is really designed to look on the back. And when you push your button down, your shutter button down, and you look through your viewfinder, you are seeing a little scale that looks like this, correct?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
You see the little scale, Clarissa?
I see it on here. I'm trying to find it on my camera.
Yeah, it's on that. When you push your button halfway down, like you're taking a picture,
Mm-hmm.
then you see that little scale
Yeah.
right here.
Is there something wrong with this?
Turn it on.
Yeah, it's on, and I have it have it there
On M. Pat, you see the scale?
Yes, I do.
Okay, super, super. What's it doing, Clarissa?
It says push and hold the lens switch in the upright direction and then rotate the lens to enable shooting.
Okay. So follow those directions.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll continue. Okay.
Okay.
This little scale is called your light meter scale. This is how your light meter is communicating to you. It is saying, if you will put me in the middle, I will give you a perfectly exposed image. So that's what that little light meter scale is doing right there. How we put it in the middle comes next. But right now, I just want to explain to you about your light meter scale. You see it, Pat?
Yeah, mine's very small.
Okay, that's okay. You've got a small camera, so it's small. Yes. Yeah.
Mine is 0.
Yeah, yours is at 0. Now, Pat, do you have a scale or do you have a +1, +2, -1, -2?
Well, mine shows a -3 on one end and 0 on the other.
Okay, that's good, but you got a scale, right?
Yeah, it says BKT.
Okay, okay, that's okay. That's okay. And Pat, make a note. You want to erase, you want to undo BKT eventually. Just make a
Okay.
note on your handout. You want to undo that one. Okay. Okay, so come back to me for just a little bit and let me explain to you about that light meter scale. This light meter scale is set to go right in the middle when your picture is perfectly exposed. So you move your f-stop, you move your shutter speed. I'll show you how to do that. You put the scale right in the middle. And when the scale goes right in the middle, you get a perfectly exposed image, provided you have the right light meter set, because your camera has 3 to 4 different mechanisms for light meters. So this is a little like, there's a button on the console of my car that I can push to go into sport mode or eco mode, or there's like 4 driving modes. I have absolutely no idea what they are. I am sure my son, if he got in my car, he would change it, but I have no idea. And I don't know whether my car would drive better if I moved it in different modes. It's under the hood. I don't really care. Your light meter is under the hood, and you really should care, because you've got 4 types of light meters and they read the light in different ways. So looking on your handout, let me explain to you what your different types of light meters are. So the first one was the light meter that was developed by engineers back in the 1950s. My father was a good photographer, not a professional, but a good photographer. He used to hold this device out in his hand and he pointed it at his subjects. And then he rotated some dials on that device and he got some settings. And then he went back to his camera and he readjusted his camera with those settings. That's called a handheld light meter. You don't need it because you've got it inside the camera. So in the 1950s, engineers put the light meter inside the camera. The first light meter that they put inside the camera was called a center weighted light meter. It read the light, like in this picture that I'm showing you, throughout the scene. It read the sun up in the top and it read the shadow down in the bottom and the midtones in the middle. And it averaged all the light together and it put a weighted average based on what was in the center, because that's usually where your subject is. But the center weighted light meter is the oldest light meter that we have. The engineers have not put much technology into the center weighted light meter. And to give you an example of how the center weighted light meter works, what happens when you mix white paint with black paint? What color do you get?
Gray.
Right, exactly. Well, that's what the center weighted light meter does. It just mushes all the colors together. And as a result, we kind of get something right in the middle. And this, once again, is the oldest light meter. So this is the light meter we do not use. So you can go ahead on your handout and just put a line through that center weighted light meter, because we don't use it that often. It's just it's not the best technology for most of our photography. And then in the late 1970s, early 1980s, which is now a long way away, engineers in Canon and Nikon came out with a new light meter called Spot. And it only reads this spot right here. And in Nikon, it's called spot because Nikon got to the patent office first. Canon calls it partial. And then Pat, you're using a Panasonic Lumix, and so they get to call it spot as well. So Clarissa and John, it's called partial for you all, and Pat, it's called spot for you. The spot meter only reads this spot, and it ignores the sun, and it ignores the shade, and it only perfectly exposed what's right there in that middle spot. Now, when this came out, this was pretty revolutionary. I'm a bird photographer, so I could photograph a hawk on a branch up against a brilliant blue sky, because brilliant blue sky is the kiss of death in photography. It's so bright. So I could photograph that hawk on that branch against that brilliant blue sky, and the hawk would probably come out as a silhouette. I could photograph but then if I moved to my spot meter, put that spot meter right on the hawk's breast, dialed in my f-stop, dialed in my shutter speed, got the scale right in the middle, and then took the picture, the hawk would be perfectly exposed, but the background might be dark or light, depending on its tonality to the hawk. A performer and a spotlight. I could put that spot meter on the performer in the spotlight against that black stage, dial in the f-stop, dial in the shutter speed, put the light meter right in the middle, and now I would get a perfectly exposed performer in a spotlight versus an overexposed performer in a spotlight. I worked my way through college as a baby photographer at Kmart and Walmart in Southern Louisiana, and we photographed kids against solid black backgrounds and solid white backgrounds. And this was like revolutionary at that time. Nobody else was doing it, and I made a ton of money. And the way we did it is we put the spot meter on the kid's face, and no matter what color that kid was, we got a perfectly exposed kid against a black background or a white background, depending on what background I pulled out. And we did that with spot meter. So we use the spot meter if we have a really contrasty situation, something very light against a very dark background, or something very dark against a very light background. So the only time we would go into spot meter or partial meter, as Canon calls it, is if we have a really contrasty situation. So that's the only time we would use it. So your spot or your partial meter, we're only going to use this about 1% of the time. And then in the 1990s, when we came out with autofocus, engineers developed new type of light meter reading system. And this light meter reading system is called evaluative for you two Canon users. And then Pat, I think it's called segmented for you, and Nikon calls it matrix. And what this light meter does is it reads this section and averages everything in that section. It reads this section and averages everything in that section. It reads this section and averages everything. It reads this section and averages everything. And then it reads this section and averages everything. So it takes different sections of your frame, takes readings, and then averages it all together. Originally, it was 5 sections, and that's why your icon shows you 5 sections in most cameras. But currently, new modern cameras coming off the assembly line can read up to 64 different sections. And John has a brand new camera. It just came out last year, and it's a high-end Canon camera. It reads 64 sections, and it even knows that this is a bright section up here, and this is a dark section down here, and it knows how to compensate for that. So you're evaluative, if you're a Canon user, you're segmented, Pat, for you and your Panasonic. This is the most advanced light meter you have. So this is the one that I want you to be set on. So that's where you all are right now, is on your evaluative or your segmented. Yeah, John, question.
Yeah. How do you find out where you are in light meter? I can't find that on the menus.
So that's that icon that I showed you just a little bit ago. And so you push your Q button.
Yeah.
on the back. Now
Yes.
toggle around, and I think it's on your second row, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a rectangle for you with a parentheses and a dot in the middle of it. And you
Yeah,
notice,
okay.
yeah, and
Yep.
you notice as you toggle along, it tells you what each one of the items are. So you found it, John?
I found that icon. I don't see where it tells me.
And
what
then
one
you
is.
push in with the set button.
Ah,
And then when you push in, you'll see what all your options are. And then you can go and make your change based on what your options are.
okay.
So Clarissa, as small as your camera is, I would leave it set on your evaluative meter all the time. Yeah, just don't make a change. Got it, John?
No, actually. Hang on. Okay, no, that's spot AF is what it says. Okay.
No, that's
Oh,
spot autofocus. I want spot metering.
Right, yeah.
I'm going to go backward just to show John where it is on his icon for his camera. It's right here, John.
Okay. Yeah, okay, I see that one, yeah. Okay.
Now push in on your set button or touch it if you want to, and then you're going to change it to this icon. Got it?
No, sorry, I'm slow here.
That's okay.
Oh, wait, hang on. I'm going through. All right, he's looking at old pictures now.
Got it?
Yeah, I see that. No, sorry. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Looking at the wrong button. Okay.
And it should have been set already. You should have set that in your homework.
Yeah, I couldn't find it.
Okay.
So- On the menus, there's those different menus across the top.
No, I don't want you to be in menu. Don't be in menu.
Okay,
So push your Q button
yeah,
or push info until you see this screen on the back of your camera.
yeah, my camera's, the screens are a little different than that.
It's exactly like that.
Oh,
Yeah, that's my R6.
okay,
So you push info until you get this screen, and then you push. So you should push info 3 or 4 times to get this screen. Info, not menu, info.
yeah, okay. I'm trying to get out of the menu thing.
Yeah. Push your
Mm-hmm.
shutter button to get out of the menu thing.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Key button.
Now push Q and now
okay.
toggle around when your screen, no, push info until your screen looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep going.
Pushing it, nothing's happening.
Nothing's happening. Push your shutter button halfway down.
Yeah.
Okay, now push info. That you took a picture.
Yeah.
Now, push your shutter button halfway down till your screen comes back up. Push info.
Well, that button's in.
There, right there.
Okay,
Now push your Q button. No, now you're back in menu again. Push your shutter. There you go. Push your shutter. Yeah.
okay, so I want the toggle down to.
You push your Q button, toggle.
Yeah. This, a Q button showing me that it just has the yellow or
Yeah,
orange.
yeah. Push your Q button.
Oh,
Now
sorry.
use your toggle up on the top to move around that. See the toggle right here, John? John, toggle
Oh,
right here.
yeah, okay. I'm with
Okay.
you.
Now use that to move around your screen until you get down to this button right here.
Okay. Oh, okay, there we go.
Push it
Evaluative
in, push it
meter.
in set. Whoops.
Yeah, okay. It says evaluative meter.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then push that. Okay,
Yeah, okay, I got it. Okay,
gotcha, good. Okay,
Yeah.
that's how you get around all your screens, okay?
got it. Okay, good.
Now, why this is so important is in this photograph right here, I used my evaluative light meter or my segmented light meter for Pat. And I did one other thing, and I'll explain this to you later on. And then I took my picture. But then this picture, I used my spot meter because the spot meter perfectly exposes what's right here. And so the difference between the two photographs is that this is what I wanted to create creatively. I had looked at the scene looked like this to my eye, because this is what the spot meter did right here. It perfectly exposed that side of that shrimp boat. This is what I saw with my eye. It was a yucky sunset, but I wanted to create this. So I used my evaluative light meter and did one other thing, and that gave me my creative photograph. But then this is what I was seeing with my eye. So your spot meter only exposes one section of the frame, and in this case is what I was seeing with my eye. But your evaluative light meter takes into account everything in the scene and then emphasizes different areas. So if you have a scene like this, where you've got the barn owl up against a very dark background. So we've got a lot of really light area right here, and we've got a really dark area in the back. This might be an option or a time when you want to push your light meter button and go into spot meter, maybe. But that's just in case. But remember, spot meter is only 1% of the time. So you're on that evaluative or that segmented light meter now, and that should work for you about 98% of the time, 99% of the time. Good? Okay.
Yeah.
Now we got to put the scale right in the middle, because we've got the underhood thing taken care of, but now we have to put that scale right in the middle. So the first thing I'm going to teach you about is your f-stop and what an f-stop does. So if you look at this photograph of this malachite butterfly, you'll see that the butterfly is all sharp. It's tack sharp all the way through. A little bit of that pink flower is tack sharp also, and a bit of the leaf is tack sharp. You notice that the background is out of focus. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So the human eye, when it looks at a photograph, it looks at everything that is in focus and it ignores everything that's out of focus. It doesn't go back there and look. So we as photographers need to put certain places in the photograph in focus and blur out other places in the photograph so that our viewer doesn't get distracted by things we don't want them to see. What do you think's in the background there?
Leaf.
What do you think it is, John?
A leaf.
Leaf? Yeah.
Yeah.
That brown stuff. What's in the background?
Oh, the brown stuff. Oh,
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Tan
Maybe
stuff.
a building.
Maybe a building. Yeah. What do you think, Pat?
Concrete.
Concrete, maybe. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's gravel in the parking lot. But if I had let you see that gravel in the parking lot and you'd recently spent the weekend shopping for gravel at Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that, then you'd be stuck on that gravel back there going, that is exactly the gravel I was looking for. And nobody had that. And now you're not looking at my picture anymore. You're all hung up in gravel. So I only show you what I want you to see. And I do this through a thing called f-stop. So if you would flip the page over, the handout that you're writing on, flip it over, and I want you to draw this chart for me because we're going to use it for some things as we're working. And give yourself some room to write underneath here because we're going to write some stuff. Give yourself some room to write over here because we're going to write some things. But make yourself a horizontal line. And under that horizontal line, write 2.8, 3.5, 4.5, 5.6, 6.8, 8, 11, 16, 22, and 32. Should get you a pencil, Clarissa?
Yeah.
So under that horizontal line, you're going to write 2.8, 3.5, 4.5, 5.6, 6.8, 8, 11, 16, 22, and 32. And then you're going to give yourself a vertical line. And next to that vertical line, you're going to write 500, 250, 125, 60, 30, 15, 8, 4, 0.3 with quotation marks, and 2 with quotation marks. And then you're going to write the word bulb. Got it? Okay. These bottom numbers are called f-stops. F with a slash and then the word stop. F-stops. These f-stops, 2.8, 3.5, 4.5, 5.6, 6.8, 8, 11, 16, 22, and 32. These f-stops are the number that you see through your viewfinder on the bottom, or you see it also on your back display panel. These f-stops are the numbers you and I talk about. So Pat and I are out shooting together and Pat says, Kathy, what f-stop should I use? And I said, well, why don't you try about an 8 on this one, Pat? John and I are going to Alaska later on in March, and John, standing on the boat, and he says, Kathy, what f-stop should we use? And I said, well, why don't we go ahead and do a 6.8? So these are the numbers that we talk about.
Wow.
So we would talk about, what numbers we used. You would see these when you download your pictures into your Lightroom or your Photoshop or your Adobe Camera Raw. I'll teach you how to do that in other classes. So these are the numbers that we see through the viewfinder, and these are the numbers we talk about. So that's what those numbers are. They're called f-stops. But why they're so important is you can't see it, but inside your lens, not the camera, the lens, there is this thing called an aperture. And your aperture lets light in and closes down and opens up to let light in or block light. And this is in the base of your lens. And that aperture at 2.8 is really, really big, and it lets in a whole lot of light. So give yourself a big circle under 2.8. So if you set your f-stop to 2.8, your lens is changing and it's giving you a really big opening that lets in a lot of light. And when you go to 3.5, that opening gets a bit smaller. And when you go to 4.5, the opening gets a bit smaller. And when you go to 5.6, the opening gets a bit smaller. And when you go to 6.8, the opening gets a bit smaller. And you know what's going to happen now. 8, it gets smaller. And 11, it gets smaller, and 16, it gets smaller, and 22, it gets smaller. And by the time you get to f32, you just have a pinprick of light coming through that aperture. And you don't see this at all, totally invisible to you. And then another thing that might be invisible to you is you have this thing called depth of field, DEPTH-field. And this is the physics of light. Light coming through the front of your lens, going through convex and concave pieces of glass. And then they've been laid on top of each other in a nice pattern. And when light goes through those pieces of glass, you get depth of field. And at 2.8, underneath 2.8, make yourself a little teeny weeny line, because when your lens is set to 2.8, you might only have a 1/16 of an inch that's in focus in that photograph. And when you go to 3.5, you get a little bit more. So make your line just a little bit bigger. And when you go to 4.5, you get a little bit more area that's in focus. So make yourself a little bit longer line. And when you go to 5.6, you get a little bit more stuff that's in focus. You get a little bit more depth of field. 6.8, you get a little bit more. And then at 8, underneath the 8, make yourself a nice thick line, because under F8 or at F8, most stuff is in focus. So your cell phone camera, for instance, F8, Most stuff's in focus. You know, we've got that new fancy, you know, portrait mode, but most of the time your cell phone camera, f8, most stuff's in focus. There's an old saying in photography, f8 and be there, meaning just put that camera on f8, most stuff will be in focus. Don't worry about it. Your program mode, the P mode, which I never want you to use, your P mode puts you at f8 because most stuff's at focus. Okay, so that's what f8 is. But then as you go to f11, more stuff is in focus, and 16 more stuff is in focus, and 22 more stuff is in focus. And by the time you get to f32, infinity is in focus. So give yourself an infinity symbol under f32. So if we get to a scene that we want to photograph, and we want from the edge of the scene that we can see through the viewfinder, all the way to the mountains in the background to be in focus, then we set our f-stop on 32. So your f-stop determines how much of your picture is in focus and how much of your picture is out of focus. And it's all based on the lens and the lens mechanism that you're using, or lens construction that you're using. So this is the basic theory, but it's all based on your lens. So your f-stop controls how much we let people see and how much we let people not see. So in this photograph of the statue where her fingers are out of focus and the background is out of focus, looking at your chart, what f-stop do you think I used? About this much in focus. What f-stop do you think I used? Jump in there. No right or wrong answer. What f-stop do you think I used? Clarissa, you were gonna take.
I was gonna say 11.
11.
Maybe. I don't know.
Much. So, you know, you can come down narrow because, you know, we're only dealing with like the statue's
True.
head. So this is for me, and the statue's looking at us. So this for me is about a 5.6 or a 6.8, something like that. Yeah. Now, on the other hand, your f11, if a butterfly suddenly landed on that statue's finger, and I wanted to change my focus point to the finger with the butterfly and still get the statue's face, that would be an f11. But then that would mean my background is going to come a little bit more in focus. And so now I'm not going to have that nice blurred background that I have.
Got it.
So we just have to make these changes based on what we think is going on inside our photograph.
Got it. Okay.
So in this photograph of this little bitty girl, this is a little 2-year-old. So she's a little tiny one. And if you notice, her little ears are out of focus. You see that? So to get that little face of that little 2-year-old, what f-stop do you think I'm using?
4.5.
Yeah.
About 4.5 or a 4. This is actually a 4. And you notice that the background is completely out of focus. What's in the background though?
Planters, it looks like maybe a building.
Yeah. We got planters back in there, and they're not important to the photograph. So I don't want you to see them, because if I show you those planters, you're going to go back there and start shopping for pots. And I don't want you to do that. I don't want to drag your brain back to any part of the photograph that's not important. I want you to look at her. And so I used a 4.0, and also you'll see that she's kind of looking up, which means she's looking up the other adults in the group. I got down on my knees, so I got down at eye level with her, because photographs always look better that way when they're at eye level with the subject. And then I moved. So you're always noticing that photographers are moving around. So I moved so that I could get those pots separated, so a pot's not coming straight out of her head, for instance. So I moved around, focused on her eyes, and got the shot. So this one's about a 4.0. So your f-stop determines how much we see in the photograph and how much we don't see in the photograph. This is about a 5.6 in this case. I don't want you to see the swing. I don't need to include the entire swing. You all know she's sitting on one of those swing things. We don't need to see it. It's not important. And 20 years from now, when you look at this photograph, it's definitely not important that she was sitting on a swing, because what we want to see is her. And so the whole blown out background back here is just a design of the photograph so the viewer doesn't get drawn away from what we want them to look at. We're designing our photograph so that people will stay looking at that photograph and stay in the scene. So your F4 gives you this photograph.
Nice.
Your F22 gives you this photograph. 4 is this one. 22 is this one. It depends on what you're trying to convey to your viewer. Clarissa immediately said, yeah, I like this one. So, you know, you're like me, I kind of like these kind of things, but it depends on whether you're trying to convey this or whether you're trying to convey this. They're exactly the same light. I've balanced my light meter, but what I'm changing is my f-stop. Same thing if we were trying to show people the Ronda bullfighting ring through the crystal ball. So this is an F4 and this is an F22. Notice the 22, the edges of the crystal ball are more crisp. F4, the edges of the crystal ball are more blurred, and what's in the background is more blurred. We have to rely on what's in the crystal ball. So it just depends on what you're trying to communicate to your subject and how you are to your viewer and how you're trying to communicate it, what your f-stop you use. So here are my cat. And by the way, Socks doesn't necessarily like having his photo taken. He's sitting on the chair next to me, trying desperately to get my attention to let him come up here and see you all. But you notice in this photograph that just a very tiny bit is in focus. And if you've got a cat and you know how big a cat's nose is, so that cat's nose to that cat's eye, very shallow depth of field here. So it's all what we're trying to communicate. So I want you to pick your camera up and put it in your hand, please. And I want you to set your f-stop on 5.6. You all should be on 5.6 right now. Correct? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, good, good. Now, John, to change your f-stop, you're using your big dial in the back. And Pat, to change your f-stop, how are you doing it with your f-stop? I forgot on your camera right now.
There's a dial in the back that you rotate.
Dial in the back that you rotate. Good, good, good. And Clarissa, do you remember how you changed yours?
Q, I press the Q button, info. Let me see.
And then you highlight that and then you rotate your dial, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So change, you can just look at the back of your camera right now. What's the biggest f-stop you can get?
It's funny. This is my first time messing with it. So
That's
I'm like,
okay. That's
I'm pushing
okay.
all these buttons.
Yeah.
Let's see what's the biggest we can go.
What's the biggest f-stop you can get? What's the biggest number you can get?
I'm trying to go back to that.
That's okay.
I don't know.
That's
Let's
okay.
see.
John, Pat, what's the biggest number you can get?
It
22
shows
is the largest I can get.
John,
8
John again, I'm
22.
sorry. 22,
Yeah,
good.
22.
Pat, what's the biggest number?
8.0.
8.0, okay.
I'm still trying to figure it out. So I like get here and it has like the
Go
graph.
back to the other screen where you've got your display panel.
My display panel.
Push your info button until you get a different display panel. Keep going. Same thing we were doing with John before. You have 4 different display
It does.
panels.
I press the info and it takes me, it shows me like SIM card and it shows me this graph up at the top and then I
Yeah.
press it again and it all goes away.
Push your shutter button halfway down. Just to reset everything, just halfway down. Now go back there and push that. There you go. Now that brings up, that just brought up a picture there. There you go.
Yeah, and it goes away.
Okay,
Maybe
I want that light meter to show
Oh, there it
up.
goes.
Yeah,
Here it
good.
is.
Right there. That's that light meter on the bottom. Yeah, good. Now push your Q button and you should be able to move around on that screen.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hello.
There you go.
This is a lot of
Okay,
stuff.
and then what's the biggest f-stop you can get? Pat, yours is 8. John, yours is 22.
Select multiple. Okay, let's see.
And that can't be changed. Is that That's the limitation there on the f-stops on this
That's the
camera?
limitation on the f-stop, exactly. Now, John and Pat, I both want you to zoom your lens. And when you zoom your lens, can you get another larger f-stop? Zoom your lens in and out. Now, can you get another larger f-stop? Pat, can you go beyond 8 now? John, can you go beyond 22?
What do you mean zoom the lens?
Does your lens zoom or is that a fixed lens?
Oh, I just have a fixed lens.
Okay,
on.
you're a fixed lens. Pat's the only one that's got a zoom.
No, it doesn't go beyond 8.
Doesn't go beyond 8. Okay, Clarissa, have you got yours fixed yet?
No, I'm still looking. I'm pressing through all of these icons to find f-stop.
No,
Right.
there's, I just want you to go to that display panel that I showed you in the beginning of class.
Oh, okay.
You know, where you have all your options up there and your light meters up there. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Push your info. You should be able to push your info 3 or 4 times to get you there.
Okay. So I'm gonna.
Or else the screen where you get most stuff.
I'm on this one screen. It has like.
Yeah. That's a
bunch
good
of stuff.
screen right there. Yeah. But then I need another screen where you got your light meter down at the bottom.
Okay.
I thought I just saw a screen where you had your light meter down at the bottom.
Is it this one?
No, but the one where your
No?
light meter is down at the bottom.
Hmm.
So it should be your regular picture taking screen on that camera.
Okay.
And then you've got your light meter right
Oh,
down.
like
at the
this
bottom.
one, this one here, this is what you wanted earlier. The one
Yeah,
you-
no, that's something different.
Oh.
You're in the M mode on the top, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. it's
okay.
on-
okay. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to continue on, okay?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay,
Mhm.
we'll get you there. Okay. So Pat and John, John can go to 22. Pat, you can go to an F8. Rotate the dial the other direction. Clarissa, keep looking for your f-stop. Rotate the dial to the other direction. And what's the smallest f-stop you can get?
I
Good
can
point.
Go ahead.
What, Jeb? I mean, Jeb. It says Jeb on your screen, Jeb. So John, I'm gonna keep calling you Jeb.
That's all right. Yeah, I can go to 1.8.
You can go to 1.8. Good. Pat, what can you go to?
2.8.
2.8. Okay, these are all based on your lens. Your lens determines what range of f-stops you can do. So John, you can go to 1.8 to 22 for your lens. And Pat, you can go from which one to 8?
2.8.
Okay, Pat, you're going to have to do a little bit of translation, okay? Because your 8 is R22.
Oh,
Yes. So, and then your 2.8?
2.8.
Your 2.8 is our 4.5. Okay, so you're going to have to do a little translation. You've got one of those cameras where they change the numbers on us. So you got a little bit of translation you're going to have to do. And the way that you can remember your f-stops and what your f-stops do is at a small number like 1.4 or 2.8 or 3.5, only a little bit is in focus. In a big number, 22 or 32, a lot of stuff is in focus. So the bigger the number, the more stuff is in focus. The smaller the number, the less stuff is in focus.
Mhm.
Okay. So John, you've got one of those lenses. It's got a 1.8 on it. And that's what I photographed Sox Cat here on.
Oh, really?
And if
Okay.
you notice, his little nose is in focus and his little eye is in focus. So
Yeah.
it's a flat plane that's in focus. And it took me about 50 photographs at 1.8 to get his eye and his nose in focus because he was moving and I was moving.
Oh, yeah.
So that lens you have that has a 1.8 on it, you won't shoot it at 1.8. You'll shoot it at 4, or you'll shoot it at 4.5, or you'll shoot it at 5. What it's designed for is to give you this beautiful, beautiful, soft background. So that's what that lens is designed for. But you won't shoot it at 1.4 or 1.8 because it's just too narrow for most stuff. Okay.
Yep.
So your lens determines your f-stop. Pat, you've got a fixed lens. You can't take your lens off of your camera. So those are the f-stops you have. Clarissa, you can't take your lenses off either, can you? Yeah,
No.
so that's what you've got. That's the way your camera's made. John can move his lenses on and off, and each one of his lenses is going to have a different range of f-stops. So from maybe 3.5 to 22 or 4.0 to 32, it all based on the construction of the lens. So looking at this landscape photograph of this river down in Costa Rica, what f-stop do you think I'm using? I've got everything in focus. What f-stop do you think I'm using?
Maybe 16 or
16.
22.
Two.
Yeah.
32.
32, exactly. Yeah. Or Pat, yours, you would go to your 8, which is like our 32, right? Because that
Yeah.
would give you that would give you everything in focus.
What is the equivalent of your 8 on my scale?
So yours would be kind of right in the middle something. So maybe, you know, you have to see how many numbers you've got in there, but you would use maybe whatever's right in the middle.
Okay.
Okay, so whatever numbers that they give you. So in this scene, notice also the very corner right is in focus.
Mhm.
And the very back is in focus also. So that's how you can see that I'm using a 22 or a 32 for this situation. Pat, you would be using an 8 for this situation. So if you go and you look at that chart that I gave you, I look at this river in Costa Rica and I go down with my tripod to the edge of that river and I set my tripod up and I compose up my scene. And I know immediately in my head that I want the viewer to see all the way up the river. So I set my f-stop to 32 because the biggest f-stop I have on my lens is 32. So I set my f-stop to 32. And now I have to look through my viewfinder and I have to start rotating my shutter speed dial. I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. I have to start rotating my shutter speed dial until my scale goes right in the middle.
Mhm.
And then my shutter stops movement or blurs movement. And notice that the water here is all blurred. You see that? Now,
Mhm.
you have never seen that with your eye. You've never
Mhm.
seen it in real life. So this is the first of our photography tricks or effects that we're going to work on. So the shutter stops movement or blurs movement. So going back to your chart, we decided that I'm going to use an f32 because that's the biggest f-stop on my lens. So I set my f-stop to 32, and then I get 1/8 of a second shutter speed. So my scale goes right in the middle at f32 and 1/8 of a second shutter speed. So now my brain has to kick in. What's my photograph going to look like with an f32 and 1/8 of a second? So you know already that f32 means I'm going to see everything in the whole scene. 1/8 of a second though. 1/8 of a second blurs water. Always blurs water. Forever blurs water. Anywhere in the world blurs water. 1/8 of a second always blurs water. How do we know that? Kathy told you that. Okay. And I learned it from somebody else and they learned it from somebody else, but water always blurs at 1/8 of a second. So when I see that I've got 1/8 of a second blur water, okay, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to blur the water. f32, I wanted to see all the way up the scene. So when I see that I get that combination, one number and one number, the f-stop and the shutter speed, then I know that my photograph is going to show the viewer everything in the scene and it's going to blur water. Bingo, exactly what I was looking for. But that only holds true for that moment in time, that light at that time. So if we went back today at a different time, we might get different numbers. So when I get my 1/8 of a second f32, I'm going to blur my water. I'm going to get everything in focus. Click, I take my picture. But John with his lens, he's got an f22, right, John?
Yes.
That's all he could get. He's standing next to me at the river in Costa Rica and we're framed up exactly the same. And he says, wait a second, I'm at f22, but when I balance my light meter at a 15th of a second, that means I can't blur the water. And I'm going to say, yeah, that's absolutely right. You're not going to blur the water. Because at f22, a little bit more light is coming through the f-stop, which means I have to get a little faster shutter speed. But the light at 22 and 15 is exactly the same as the light at 32 and 8. They're exactly the same. So John's going to say, wait a second, I only came down to this river so that I could blur the water. And what John's going to have to do is he's going to have to wait for the sun to go down just a little bit, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And when the light fades just a little bit, he'll be able to use his f22 and finally get 1/8 of a second. And then at that point, I'll be at 32 1/4 of a second.
Mm.
So when we balance the light meter and we look at the numbers, we have to determine what that picture is going to look like using our mind. We're the only ones with the brain. The camera's just a machine. And we have to look at those numbers and determine whether that's going to work for us or not.
Mhm.
But what's really remarkable with photography is I can go to 16 and I can balance my light meter at 1/30 of a second. I can go to f11 and the light meter will balance at 1/60 of a second. I can go to f8 and the light meter will balance at 1/25 of a second. And I can go to 6.8 and the light meter will balance at 250. And I can go to 5.6 and the light meter will balance at 500. And that's because each one of these places that the light meter balances is exactly the same amount of light. It's just opening that aperture up and speeding up that shutter speed. So which one you choose is up to your knowledge of photography so that you can determine whether this picture is going to end up looking like you want it to look. Because just like 0 + 4 is equal to 4 and 3 + 1 is equal to 4 and 2 + 2 is equal to 4, we've got a lot of different things that equal, but we have to, with our brain, determine whether this is going to work for us artistically or not. So all of them match. So this, for instance, see how the water is more turbulent? So you can actually see the flow of the water. So this is more like that f11 at 1/25 of a second or f8 at 1/25 of a second, whatever it was on your chart. This is the photo I would want to show to anglers because this is a famous trout stream in Costa Rica. Lots of trout fishing goes on in this stream. They don't care about blurred water. Photographers are the only ones that care about blurred water. They want to see turbulence. They want to see the eddies. They want to see the flow of the water. So this would be a faster shutter speed, but then this is what I would show photographers because photographers, once we learn how to blur the water, that's all we ever want to do from now on is blur the water. So whether we're trying to show how turbulent the water is or how smooth water is, it depends on who our audience is. Now, this is 32, remember? And you can see the moss covered log here in the front all the way to the back. But when I go to that turbulent water, that F8 or whatever I was using, you notice that I can still see that moss covered log in the front and the background still looks to your eye like it's clear. And that's because I'm using a lens designed for landscape photography so that we can change our f-stops more without the viewer noticing it. So we're still balancing the light meter. See, the light's exactly the same with each one of those photographs. Whoops, sorry. The light's exactly the same, but you're not noticing the f-stops as much because I'm using a wide angle lens for this. That's why we use it for landscape photography. So our lenses, interchangeable lenses on John's camera are used for different purposes. So that's why we change them out. So your f-stops control how much we see in the scene and your shutter speeds control how much movement we stop or how much movement we blur. And then your lens determines how much of this we're going to be able to blur and how much we're not going to be able to blur. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good, good. Now, if you look at this scene of the canal in Venice, You see that the water's blurry, right?
Mhm.
So you don't know what all my settings are, but now we know about blurred water. So roughly what shutter speed am I using? Because the water's blurred.
Like
One-
15,
Where's water blur?
8.
1/8.
8,
Right.
exactly. Now
Oh.
look on your handout and you'll see that I've given you that 1/8 of a second blurs water.
Mhm.
So when you look at a photograph and you see blurred water, you're going to say, okay, so she's roughly using an
Okay.
1/8, or an 1/8 of a second. I'm sorry, I misspoke. And you can see all the way down the canal. So that tells you what roughly what f-stop am I using?
32 or 22.
32 or your 8, Pat, right?
Yeah.
And then you notice that the people are blurred. See that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the ghost photography. This lady's kind of still, but these people are kind of blurred. The guy with the white bag is kind of still. We can see him, but the people going up and down the stairway, they're blurred. So this tells you that I'm using a slow shutter speed that's blurring movement.
Okay.
And then if you want to see the gondolas, then you're going to have to speed up the shutter speed, because see the guy with a white bag?
Mhm.
He's still there. If your shutter speed's too slow, your gondolas are going to disappear. If your shutter speed's faster, then your gondolas will appear, because we have to use a fast enough shutter speed to make the gondolas stop. Because anything that's just moving at a very slow, steady pace, the right pace, will disappear completely in your photograph. We call it ghost photography. So if I want to see the gondolas, I've got to use a faster shutter speed because they're there. You just don't see them with the slow shutter speed because they're just cruising along. So a shutter speed stops movement or blurs movement. Okay. Now let's look at your shutter speed. So put your camera back in your hands. Shutter is in your camera. When you bought the camera, the shutter is in the camera and your shutter speeds are dependent on the camera body. So shutter speeds, John, that'll be your front dial. And Pat, that's your front dial, if I'm not mistaken, on you. Clarissa, did we ever get to that screen?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it was f3.5 all the way to 22 is where I.
Yay!
Yeah.
Congratulations, good.
Thank you. I know. I was like,
Okay,
yes.
okay, yeah. Okay, now, don't touch anything, I think, Clarissa. You just use your front dial now, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, and that changes your shutter speed. What's the
Yeah.
fastest shutter speed you can get? 4,000, 2,000, 8,000? What's the fastest shutter speed you can get?
I can get 1/8,000th.
Good. And that's 8,000th of a second.
Yes.
Yeah. Clarissa, how fast is yours?
I'm looking for it. It's not on this one, right? I'm trying to.
Yeah, it's on that one
It's
right
on
there.
here?
But see how you're on P?
Uh-huh.
Where it says P up there? I want you on
Yeah.
M. Because
Okay,
you don't
yeah.
have any control over it when you're on P. But that's
Got
that
it, I'm
screen I
on.
want you to get. Whatever screen you were just on. Pat, how fast of a shutter speed can you go to?
16 thousandths.
16,000?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fast, really fast. So that's twice as fast as
is.
John's will go. Yeah, yeah. Clarissa, how fast can yours go? No,
I'm still trying to
you're
find
still,
it.
you're still not. Okay, go, you know, that screen you just showed me? Should be able to push your Q button and go over to that P and make it into an M.
Oh, okay. Right.
Right?
There's so many buttons here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
And
know
it's
it.
so tiny too.
And they're
like
so
it's-
tiny. Exactly, exactly, exactly.
Um,
Now, Pat and John, I want you all to rotate the dial the opposite direction. And where's the first time you see quotation marks?
Once, or 8/10, 6/10, half a second. No? three, let's see, that's three
Yeah.
hundredths of a second, I guess.
So that's a third of a second. Zero quotation marks, 3. Yeah, so that's a third
Yeah.
of a second.
Third a second, you're right. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Pat, where's the first time you see quotation marks?
It says 4.
4. That's the first time. You don't get a 1 or a 2 with quotation marks?
It starts at 4 and moving to the right, it goes 2 and then 1.
With quotation marks?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so you get quotation marks the first time at 1, right?
Yeah, I guess, depending
Okay, good.
on scale.
That's 1 second, Pat. When you see quotation marks and a whole number, that's
Okay.
1 second. So
Okay.
John, when you see your first whole number, no decimal and quotation marks is where?
At 3.
3. So the first time that you get to full seconds is at 3 seconds. You don't get a 2 or a 1, John? With
A
quotation
third a
marks?
second, I'm sorry. 0, it's a quotation mark 3, that's a third. You whole numbers, I'm sorry, 1.
Yeah.
1 second.
1 second. Good, good,
Yeah, and it
good.
goes up to 30.
Yeah. Did you get it, Clarissa?
I'm still
Okay.
learning.
You got, that's okay. You got the recording to dig through and
Yes.
everything. Yeah. So you got the recording to dig through it. Okay. So keep going, Pat and John. And when you get to 30 seconds, 30 with quotation marks.
Yes,
Okay. That's long time. And we're going to
Yeah.
use a lot of those long exposures for things like night photography and street photography and that type of thing. So that's when we get 30 with quotation marks, that's 30 full seconds. Camera's got to be on a tripod, and you've never known 30 seconds is so long until you mistakenly push that button and you have to wait 30 seconds. It is a long time. And then after that, Pat, on your camera, you get the word bulb.
No, mine only goes to 4 seconds.
To 4 seconds. So that's as long as yours will go. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And those really are legitimate. Those are exactly the same numbers that we would have. So you don't have a 30-second exposure on that camera. You just have a 4-second exposure on that camera. Okay. Clarissa?
Yeah, no, I keep pushing the Q button and it takes me to like preset, background, brightness, contrast. So I'm just like, I
Go
have no
back to
idea.
that, but go back to that screen where you saw where I saw that P and I told, that
The
full
P,
black.
So I had
screen.
it, I moved, so right now I'm on like the mode, like regular
Yeah.
automatic. So I put it here on the little camera and
Yeah, you're
that's
supposed to
where-
put it on the little camera. Uh-huh.
Okay,
There
so
you
that's
go.
where it took me
And then
here.
you're supposed
I
to be
push
able
here,
to
so
push.
now I
Yeah,
have the
yeah, yeah,
P.
yeah. That's the screen I want you to use from now on.
Okay,
Okay, while we're
but you
talking
said
in here.
you didn't want P, you wanted M.
I didn't want P, but I think you have to push either push the P. Can you touch the P? No.
It doesn't do anything.
Okay, now push the Q.
Oh, the Q button, okay.
Now,
Okay,
can you toggle over to that P?
I can now, I push.
Yay.
I
Now,
can
now
highlight it.
rotate your dial on the back of the camera. No, 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 the shutter dial. Don't change anything. The shutter dial, rotate the shutter dial or the big dial on the back. Toggle on that big.
This guy, right?
Toggle. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Toggle
This
on the
one.
back where your thumb is. Toggle on the back where your thumb is. See right where
My-
your thumb is? There's
Yeah,
a toggle.
this here?
Yeah, yeah. It goes left and right.
Oh, okay.
Push that P. No, no, no. Go back. Push that
Okay.
P. You got to push Q first. There. Now use that little toggle thing. Now take it
Okay.
to M.
Got it.
Push.
Okay, now I'm on M.
Okay. Now from now on, you go to that screen, and when you need to change your f-stop or your shutter speed, you push the Q, touch that area, and then use that little thumb thing to get you backwards and forwards. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, that's how we move it.
Q, okay, cool.
Got it?
Let's see
Okay.
that.
Now what I want you all to do is I want you all to go to 5.6 on your f-stop. Go to 5.6 on your f-stop.
Okay.
Okay. Got it on 5.6?
Mhm.
Okay. And Pat, when you come back, you're going to go to 5.6. Okay. Now,
Okay.
John, I want you to look through your viewfinder.
okay.
Pat, you're going to go to 5.6. When you go to 5.6, John, look through your viewfinder and now rotate your front dial and that will change your shutter speed.
Right.
Pat, look through your viewfinder when you get to 5.6, push down your shutter button just to activate everything. And now rotate your shutter dial, Pat, to get your scale right in the middle. Clarissa, hold your
Mhm.
camera up, okay?
Mhm.
And then point it at your scene. And if you want to, now you've got your f-stop at 5.6, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. This is going to be a little hard for you because we can go to another screen where you can actually see your picture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Now I want you to change your shutter speed dial, which is your top dial, until your scale goes right in the middle. And that scale on the bottom when it goes right in the middle, right? So
Mhm.
John and Pat and Clarissa, when your scale goes right in the middle, take the picture and tell me what shutter speed you got.
Mine says 125.
Good, take the picture.
I'm having trouble with this scale. It's so little.
Oh yeah, it's so little, exactly, exactly. John, when yours goes right in the middle, what shutter speed do you get?
Yeah, I can't get it to move. I'm looking at the scale and I'm changing.
Okay,
the
then
shutter
rotate it the other direction. It's jammed up against the side. So rotate your dial to the opposite direction. And it should be kind of slow. You see Clarissa got a 1/25th of a second. Did you get a 1/25th of a second, Clarissa?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. I did.
Yeah. Now, Clarissa, point your camera up at the ceiling and do the same thing and take the picture again. And put the scale right in the middle. Pat, what'd you get?
Oh, I see.
I don't know what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
I got a sixth of a
Same.
second.
No, I'm kidding.
1/6 of a second. Good. Take the picture, John.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Now, John, point your camera up at the light. Do the same thing.
Oh,
Okay. Pat, did you get it?
No, this little scale goes from 0 to +3. Is that the one I'm supposed to be looking at?
Uh-huh. And Pat, you may not have a scale. You might just have a -1, -2, -3, and a +1, +2, +3.
That's it says 0 and then +3 on the other end. And then 5.6 and then 2 seconds.
Good. Click. Take the picture. When yours might be 0, 0 if you don't have a little scale, but I think you have a little scale.
So what am I looking for?
You put the scale right in the middle. Or if you don't have a scale, then you've got a 0.0 or you've got a 1.0 or you've got a 2.0.
No, is that have to do with bracketing?
No, now you need to turn off that bracketing. And so bracketing is causing you a lot of problems right now. So you need to make a note to turn that off.
Bracket is off.
You don't want it to be on bracketing because bracketing means you get one dark picture, one bright picture, and one overly bright picture. Okay, I'm going to keep moving, okay? Okay, so what Clarissa and John, you all just did is you balanced your light meter, okay? So that picture that you got on the back of the camera, Pat, pull that picture up on the back of the camera. Does it look like the light in your room? Pull your picture up on the back of your camera. Does it look like the light in the room? Now, it's not going to look great, but does it look like the light in the room?
Yes.
Good. You balanced your light. You balanced your light meter.
But I'm
Clarissa,
getting-
does it look like the light in the room?
Yes.
Good. John?
yeah.
Super. Okay. You just balanced your light meter. So when you put that scale right in the middle, I gave you the f-stop and you set the shutter speed based on what your light was in your room.
Mhm.
And you notice that when you pointed it up at the light or at the window, you got a faster shutter speed. But when you pointed the camera down at the ground where it's dark, you got a slower shutter speed, correct?
Mhm.
Yes.
And that's because where it's dark, you've got a slower shutter speed, and where it's bright, you've got a faster shutter speed. So
Mhm.
your light meter, you've now balanced your light meter. So
Yes.
good, congratulations. Okay, come on back to me on shutter speed just a little bit more, because you notice when we went through all your shutter speeds, Pat went all the way from 16,000 to 4 seconds. John went from 8,000 to 30 seconds. So you have a lot of shutter speeds to choose from. So I've given you 5 on your handout. We'll use these as kind of benchmarks, starting points. So
Mhm.
1/8 of a second if you want to blur the water in a photograph. Camera's got to be on a tripod. But then if you look through the viewfinder and you have a very gentle movement going on. So with this redbud leaf or branch, I looked through my viewfinder and I saw a very tiny bit of movement going on. Ah, drats. I thought I was going to lead with my f-stop and follow with my shutter speed. Nah, first thing I dial in now is my shutter speed. So then I dial in a 15th of a second, gentle movement, and then I follow with my f-stop. So at this point, I have to lead with my shutter speed because shutter stops movement. So when you're balancing your light meter, you have to think about what kind of movement we're going to stop. So if you have very gentle movement in your scene, then you have to have at least a 15th of a second. Anything faster than that is okay, but your slowest shutter speed can be a 15th of a second. And then if you have a living creature, like the photograph of socks here in your photograph, then your shutter speed has to be at least a 60th of a second. So anytime you're photographing a living creature that has eyes, blinking eyes, moving head, twitching whiskers, smiling, you have to have at least a 60th of a second shutter speed. So I want to photograph socks. I dial in a 60th of a second, compose up my photograph, click the shutter button halfway down to turn on the light meter system. And now I balance my light meter using the f-stop because I know what shutter speed I need. Now I have to balance using the f-stop. And you notice if you look at this, that Socks's eyes are in focus. You see that? If the eyes are not in focus on any living creature, cat, dog, grandmother, granddad, kid, lizard, snake, frog, horse, whatever. If the eyes are not in focus, it drives us crazy. Humans do not like out of focus eyes. So we want to change our focus point to always be on the eyes of the subject. So John, on your camera, this is fairly easy for you to do. So John, on your camera, you have a button that looks like this on the back. You see that?
Yes.
And Clarissa, do you have a button that looks like that on the back of your camera?
No.
No button that looks like that. I bet you yours is going to be touch screen, Clarissa. You're going to be able to move your focus point around touch screen on yours. Yeah. So John, with you, you push that button to activate your focus.
Yep.
And then you have a whole slew of different focusing options to use.
Yes.
And you can use that animal eye focus. For instance, Clarissa, you've got you've got people eye autofocus face.
Mhm.
So you've got that as well, and that'll go to the eyes. Pat, on your camera. Oh,
Yeah.
Clarissa, yeah, right here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I know how to get there now.
Yeah, I gave that one to you. Okay, good. Good. You know how to get there now, don't you?
Yes.
Yes,
God, yep.
good. That's yours on yours. And then Pat, here's the back of your screen. It's this icon right here. And so you push your info button or your display button to activate the back, right?
Yeah.
And then you move with your toggle. This is your toggle, so you can move left, right, up, and down on this screen right here. Correct?
Doesn't really look like that.
That's what the manual says.
Yeah.
I grabbed it from the manual. So when
I've
you
s-
push your display, you get a background panel that looks like this. You might have to push your display 2 times or 3 times to get this background panel. And Clarissa, double check on yours. Can you touch your screen to move your focus point around?
I can, so I pressed
This one right here?
that button. Yeah, I pushed the button, but it didn't do anything.
You have to push set. So
Set,
once you
okay,
test it, once you touch it, you have to push set.
okay,
Yeah.
see.
Pat, you with me?
Is that what they're calling quality?
Is that quality? Okay, then I have the wrong one circled, Pat. Go to this one right here. Look at my screen. Go to this one right here, this little square. Go to that one. I circled the wrong one. But you want to go to this one right here. Right there.
Yeah, I don't know where that one is. I'll have to look through here.
Okay.
So I was able to push the button and it
Uh-huh.
takes me to a different screen and it's like, it just gives me these options here. So it's
And-
like tracking and it has like these little icons.
Whoa, 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 whoa. And click that screen again and then read to me what it says, tracking.
Tracking and it has like these tiny little icons. It's just like these buttons.
Yeah,
here.
so you've got either the face, I think, is that what it says? It says tracking.
Yeah, it has the face on it.
Okay, so that means it's going to track somebody's eyes. And then the
Yeah.
other one, it's going to be a big square, a little square, and a smaller square, right?
Spot
So,
AF. Mhm.
yeah,
and then
so if you're
full.
photographing a face, then you're going to set it to that. And
Okay.
Pat, your screen, you want to set it to this one right here.
And what is that called?
That should be your focus spot.
Mhm.
What do they call it, Pat, when you go to that icon?
I can't find the icon. I have an AFAE lock button.
No, don't do that one. That's up at the top. You can't go to this little icon right over here on the far left of that screen?
No,
No? Why not? What's it say when you push on it?
there is no little square.
There is no little square when you push on that far left?
No,
Okay.
on the, I
Okay.
don't have,
Okay,
it's not-
we'll have to look in your manual and see how you do it, okay?
what's it called again?
It's a focus point.
Okay.
Okay, and what you want to do with your focus point. So John and Clarissa have eye that they can use. Pat, I don't think you have eye, but you have one point. And for this lion, for instance, she was laying in the grass with her head down on the ground. And the guide said, the moment she hears the male roar, she's going to raise her head up and she's going to look around and she's going to be gone. So you better get ready. And so I activated my top focus point in Pat's camera. And in Clarissa and John, I activated my eye focus. I would activate my eye focus. And then when she starts raising her eye up, then I just reposition my camera so that that one focus point in Pat's camera is on the eye. Clarissa and John, I reposition my camera so that the camera's locked onto the eye, and then I start photographing. So we have to be in charge of the individual focus points, because if we're not, if we have all the focus points activated, but in John and Clarissa, we haven't told it, look for the eye, then it'll start looking for the grass over here.
Mm.
And then we'll lose our picture because the autofocus will get stuck on the grass.
Mhm.
So we have to control where our camera is focusing. So in this case, I'm focusing up here on the top where the man is. And that way the autofocus is not getting stuck on his hand. So Pat, in your camera, I would put the focus point up here on the top of the frame. And that way I'm focused on the man as he's going by on the horse, and I'm focused on his face. The man in the parade going by on a horse, that's your 250th of a second. So I've got to make sure I've got a fast enough shutter speed to stop the man on the horse as he's going by on the parade. And then I've got to make sure that I've got a focus point up on the top. So we want those focus points to be able to be movable, and we want to control them. We want to control them. We had a young lady photograph somebody in the family when they had a wedding. And me as a photographer, I'm always looking over photographers' shoulders to see what they're doing. And I noticed that she had her center focus point activated. So every single one of the wedding pictures had the focus right in the center. So that means when the wedding party was all lined up, that she focused on one person's face, and that means everybody's feet were cut off. The bridesmaids coming down the aisle, she focused on their face, and that means that their feet was cut off. So nobody was ever over to the side, or there was never any creative focusing and composition, because she used the focus point in the middle every single time. So that's boring. So here, for instance, on the young boy on the swing, this, John, what you working on?
I was just noticing when I set the scale for the
Light meter?
light meter,
Yeah.
changes from when I just have it. From when I just have it there, when as opposed to,
Yes,
I guess I should
because-
be putting in these focus for it to,
No, pay attention. This is important.
okay,
Everywhere you move your camera, your light meter scale changes. It's very sensitive. So every single time you just gently move that camera, your light meter scale is going to change.
okay. It's
And you've
because
always
I'm
gotta
moving the
keep-
camera, not because I'm just hitting the focus.
It's
key.
because you're moving the camera. Exactly. So that light meter scale is very, very sensitive. I'll show you how to shoot a little bit faster next class, but for right now, I want you to stay where you are, okay?
Okay,
So focus point up at the top on the little guy's eyes, and then shutter speed 250th of a second. He's just a little kid, not a big kid on the swing, just a little kid. So since he's moving, I've got to make sure that I've got a fast enough shutter speed to stop his movement. And then I balance the light meter with whatever f-stop goes in to make the scale in the middle. Notice how I've positioned him so that he's up against a long way away on the playground. So that allows me to blur the background out. So you as a photographer, you decide whether your subject is going to be, and then that allows you to blur the background out when you need to. So shutter speed stops movement. Shutter speed stops movement. So this blue-gray tanager down in Costa Rica, notice how I use the focus point over to the side, makes the photograph a lot more interesting. So I'm moving the focus point around to change my compositions and make my pictures look more interesting. I noticed that I had this beautiful blown out background here. And so as the bird is tipping over to go drop down to the feeder underneath it, then I'm photographing the bird over there. So 250th of a second for that type of motion on the bird, 500th of a second shutter speed on the whale's tail. So that whale fluking his tail up in the air, I've got to be a 500th of a second shutter speed, or maybe even faster. So at 500th of a second shutter speed, notice that the water formed balls. You see that splash is balls of water? So 500th of a second forms balls on the water splash. 1/8 of a second blurs water. 500th of a second is where water starts becoming nice and crisp. So for this whale fluking, I knew that I needed a fast shutter speed, but how fast do I actually need? So if I want to stop that splash, then I know I need 500th of a second or faster than that. So with this whale's tail, with the light that I was in, I could easily get a 500th of a second for the splash, but I might want a little faster than that. But when I balanced my light meter, the fastest I could get was 500th of a second. So the final component of taking your photographs is your ISO. So your ISO is how fast you are asking the sensor to record light, ISO. Now, Canons, your best color, your best sharpness, and your best quality is at ISO 100. Pat, yours is the same thing on that Lumex. Your ISO at 100 is your best quality and your best clarity. With this whale, when I was photographing it, if I was at ISO 100, because I'm a Canon user, I didn't quite have enough light to get me to a 500th of a second shutter speed. But if I took my ISO, don't change anything right now. If I took my ISO from 100 to 200, at 200, I could finally get a 500th of a second shutter speed for the light that I had. If I want a faster shutter speed, then I would have to go to ISO 400 or maybe even ISO 800. So if you ever need a faster shutter speed than what the light gives you, because you all notice like in your house right now that you all were getting like 20th of a second and 15th of seconds when you were balancing your light meter. If you ever need a faster shutter speed, then you would have to raise your ISO to let your sensor record light faster. So we don't need it all the time. We want to keep it as low as possible, but when we need a faster shutter speed, this is our little ace in the hole to help us there. So here's a photograph that I took in the Sahara Desert when we were out in the Sahara in Morocco to photograph some night skies. The guys were sleeping in these tents and the guys have fed us. We've had our dinner. We're waiting for the sun to go down. They're playing the drums around the campfire. I'm not going to miss this photograph. So I'm going to set my tripod up. I'm going to point my camera at the scene, and I don't have a fast enough shutter speed to stop their hands moving. So I just keep raising my ISO till I get to at least a 60th of a second because they're moving around a pretty good bit. So I raise my ISO until I get to like 1/25th, maybe 2/50th of a second, but I blur their hands still, but at least their bodies are somewhat solid. And don't feel sorry for me, guys, because there's a flush toilet in that tower back there. So, you know, we're not totally roughing it. I don't make you rough it really, really bad. But you see in this photograph, the fire looks good, the ground looks good, the tents look good. You got the whole thing. But to get that faster shutter speed, I had to raise my ISO. Well, when I blow the picture up, this is called noise. So the higher your ISO is, the worse the noise is going to be. Looks okay when you're looking at it from a distance, but if you look at it up close, doesn't look real good. But I can use the Adobe products like Lightroom or Photoshop, and they've got noise reduction. So then I can take it through noise reduction and kind of smooth out some of that noise. Looks a little bit better, but I can never recover the hands because I didn't capture them at the time. So how high of an ISO you can use is really your personal preference and how much you want the photograph. The newer your camera is, the better your ISO is going to be, high ISO is going to be. The older your camera is, the worse your high ISO is going to be. The newer your camera is and the more expensive your camera is, the higher your ISO is going to be and the better quality high ISO you're going to have. So in this case with this Jaguar down in Pontanal, I had the top of the line Canon camera and the most expensive Canon camera that Canon makes. So this means at this ISO 5000, you can't even tell that I'm using a high ISO. And if we blew it up, you probably can't tell. But I need that high ISO because the Jaguar is in the shade. I'm in the boat because we can't get onto the land in this area. We can only travel in boats. I've got 12 of photographers with me in the boat, and we got a boatman in the back, and he's moving around, and all the photographers are jockeying, trying to get their positions. So we're moving around a tremendous amount. So we've got to be in the 2000 shutter speed, 4000 shutter speed range just to stop this Jaguar as he's walking along in the shade. So I've got to have that high ISO. So it's this last little component you can use when definitely, absolutely, I want this picture. So that's when we can get that higher shutter speed. I've got a friend in Florence who runs a cologne shop, And in the old days, when I would take photographers in there, we would have to have cameras on tripods and everybody would have to hold their camera steady on the tripod. And she would get all nervous because we were going to knock over her cologne. And if we could go to Florence today, we could all walk in there and I would just say, raise your ISO, guys, to about 400 or 800. We need at least a shutter speed of a 60th of a second. And then we could walk around and photograph without having to worry about our tripods. So that high ISO gives us the ability to photograph something like the kids. I look across the dinner table, the kids are doing something really cute. I just put my camera on the table because if I raised it to my face, they're going to know I'm photographing them. So I just put my camera on the table, go to that live view on the back of the camera, raise the ISO so that I get at least a 60th of a second, touch the back of the camera so that I focus on their faces. And then I just sat there and photographed without them knowing. So that high ISO gives me the ability to raise that shutter speed when I don't have enough light. So it's a great tool to use, but we don't want to use it all the time because once again, it degrades the quality of the photograph. But in a photograph like this, I don't care. I mean, I want the picture of the kids. So there's sometimes when I'm going to use a high ISO and sometimes when I'm not going to use a high ISO. So in a photograph like this, am I using a fast shutter speed or a slow shutter speed to photograph the lightning? Fast or slow?
Fast. I would think fast.
Fast. How fast do you think, John?
Maybe a thousandth.
Thousandth? Clarissa, what do you think? Fast or slow?
I would say fast as well.
Fast.
I was going to say 500.
Okay, 500. Pat, what do you think? Fast or slow?
I think very fast.
Very fast. Okay. If I used a fast shutter speed, I would only capture a little teeny fragment of the lightning. I need a slow shutter speed of 30 seconds for the lightning to streak across the sky.
Ah,
Oh.
So this is a long shutter speed so that I capture all the bolts and every single bit of the electricity as it goes across the sky. Cameras on tripod. One of the best lightning storms I've ever seen in my life. It was
It's
amazing.
beautiful.
Yeah, it was
Wow.
amazing. This is why we go to Big Bend, by the way, on workshops in August, because we get really violent thunderstorms at night. So this is one of the reasons we go. So the acrobat flipping through the air. So she's twisting and turning and flipping as she's flying through the air. Do I use a fast shutter speed or a slow shutter speed?
Fast.
Slow.
Fast and slow. John, how
I say
fast?
slow because it stops movement.
Does slow stop movement or does fast stop movement?
I don't know. I have it on my notes here. On my notes, I was like, slow shutter speed stops or blurs movement.
Slow shutter speed stops or blurs movement. So you change that to a slow shutter speed blurs movement.
Blurs movement. Okay.
Fast shutter speed stops movement. So the faster the shutter speed is, the more movement we're going to stop. So would we use a fast shutter speed or a slow shutter speed?
Fast.
Fast. How fast?
Well, I'd say 500.
500. What do you think, John?
well, according to your notes, 1/500 stops running and flying. So
Yeah.
Yep.
What do you think, Pat? How fast?
Agree. 1/500.
Agree? Okay, this is that 4,000, guys.
What?
Yeah. So, you know, I'm in Santorini. You can see that I'm off on some island somewhere. I've got more
I
light than
noticed.
I know what to do with. And I noticed this
Wow.
lady just twisting and turning and flipping and jumping. And so I asked her, can I photograph you? We don't even speak the same language. And she said, sure. And so I knew that no matter what, I needed the fastest shutter speed I could get. So mine will go to 8,000, but I just happened to go to 4,000 on this one. So whatever it took to give me, I've got bright light. So 4,000th is almost easily to get there. But then if I needed to raise my ISO a little bit, then I went ahead and did it. And then I gave her the signal to start flipping. And then I fired and kept firing and kept firing and kept firing. And lo and behold, she flipped all the way out of my frame and I missed everything. So then I had to say, and this is where you as a photographer, the more you know what your subject is going to do, the better photographer you're going to be. And I'd never photographed anybody doing this before. And so then I had to ask her, would you please do that again? And then I got her the second and the third time, because after a while I had I got a feel for what she was doing. But this is a 4,000th of a second shutter speed to stop that hair as it's flying, shoelaces as they're flying, and capture her.
Beautiful
So-
pose.
So if you're
Okay.
doing, yeah, John.
I'm sorry, back in that last one. So I got all that part, but then on the ISO speed, do you assume 100? You're going to stay with that because you get higher
No,
quality?
this is where you got to kind of move. So I knew that to get my shutter speed up to a 4,000, because I've been photographing,
okay.
easily with 1,000 in this light, then I know that to get it to 4,000, I probably need to go ahead and raise it some. So I'm going to raise it some to raise that up.
Got
Yeah,
it.
so I'm going to kind of
Okay.
play with it a little bit. So if you're photographing the kids in the gymnasiums where we don't have real good light, then once again, you have to figure out how fast of a shutter speed is going to stop them. And also movement, blurry movement many times conveys to people that things are moving. So blurs are okay. So in this gymnasium where the light's not real good, it doesn't take me long to comprehend that the girls are getting points for standing still and throwing colorful things up in the air. So then I only could get a 20th of a second shutter speed without raising the ISO too high. So why not just go ahead and use a slow shutter speed that'll stop the girls? So a 20th with my camera stabilized would stop the girls because they're standing still, and then blur the flags just a little bit, just to be a little creative.
Mhm.
Same thing with the dancers here. I've got enough stage lights that I could freeze it if I wanted to, but the blurry skirts give me a little bit more creativity. So I just need a fast enough shutter speed to stop the audience members who are totally into this performance, you can tell, bored out of their minds. So I only need enough to stop that. And then I can use a slower bit of shutter speed to show the movement in a photograph. So we don't always have to stop everything in a photograph. Okay.
Mhm.
So pull one of those pictures up on the back of your camera, please. And I need to show you about histogram, and then I'll let you get out of here and go have some lunch. So when you pull one of the pictures up on the back of your camera, on the Canons, we're going to pull the picture up on the back of our camera, and then we're going to push the info button 1 time, 2 times, or 3 times until we get this histogram. Should show up right next to the photo. And
Yep.
Pat, when you pull up a picture, you should push maybe your display button to get you to this histogram.
Yeah, I've got it.
Yay, yay. Okay, so what this histogram is a way to confirm whether you got the right exposure or not. So a histogram is if you took this picture of the cat on the couch and you converted it to black and white, and then you separated all 256 black and white tones, because that's how many black and white tones you would have. And then you graphed each tone, that's what a histogram is. So a histogram, like the one on the bottom, that goes all the way from the left corner, which is your blackest blacks, all the way to the right corner, which is your whitest whites. The histogram on the bottom says that I captured all possible colors in the photograph. But the histogram on the top is the one that I started with. And I have to show you how I worked through this process. So I see this cat on a couch in a bookstore. The sun is coming through the upper left-hand corner of the window. I want that sun to come through the upper left-hand corner of the window. So wherever it's whitest white is definitely going to blow out. And that's your blinks, if you've ever seen your blinks on your photographs. So if you've ever seen your highlight indicator on your photograph. So you want to set these pictures also so that you see the highlight indicator. And if you're not seeing a blink on the back of your camera right now, then you want to make sure that that's set. It's in your blue menu, John, on your camera. That means Clarissa, it should be in your blue menu. Don't set it right now. Just make sure that it's set. So I look at the picture on the back of my camera. I first of all, I compose it up, set in my f-stop, set in my shutter speed, and I put the scale right in the middle. Click. Now I look at the picture on the back of my camera, pull it up to this highlight indicator, or the histogram, I'm sorry. And the histogram goes all the way across and spikes up this right side. The right axis, the right side, not leading up to it, but the right side is your purest, brightest whites with no detail. That's your highlight indicator that's blinking at you, usually on the back of your picture. So any place that you see blinking means that there is no data in that spot on your photograph. So my very first exposure, it's blinking in the corner, but I know that that's where the sun is. It's blinking on the floor. That means there's no detail on the floor. It's blinking on the couch. That means there's no detail on the couch. And the cat's blinking. That means there's no detail on the cat. That means I can't pull it out later because I didn't even capture it. So turn the camera vertical again, take a second picture, but now instead of putting my light meter in the middle, I put it one stop negative, one big mark negative. Take the picture with the focus point on the cat, by the way. Look at the picture on the back of my camera with my histogram and my highlight indicator. And now the corner is blinking like I expect it to, because that's where the sun is. The sun will always blink in your photographs, so don't worry about it. The floor is not blinking now. The couch is not blinking now, except the cat is blinking. So this means I have to take the picture a third time, turn the camera vertical, focus on the cat. And now instead of the light meter being one stop under, I'm going to take it 2 stops under. That's going 2 big marks underexposed. Focus on the cat, click. And now when I look at the picture on the back of the camera, this area where the sun is blinking, the floor is not blinking, couch is not blinking, and now the cat's not blinking. So we use that highlight indicator and that histogram to guide us to a properly exposed image. And if we get the properly exposed image in the camera, then we can do anything with it later on in your Lightroom or your Adobe Camera Raw Photoshop. Okay. So we have to get that exposure right. Now, John, you've got a mirrorless camera, and Clarissa, you've got mirrorless. We can see that through the viewfinder. And so if you look through the viewfinder and you have your histogram pulled up and you notice that it's spiking up your right side, then instead of balancing the light meter, we would take it toward the negative. Pat, you're just going to have to kind of hunt and peck sometimes. And then if you also see the histogram not going all the way to the corner, then we might need to overexpose. So most of the time, your light meter is going to lead you to exactly the right exposure. But sometimes we'll get it over or under based on what the light is. And we might need to have to rephotograph it. And we trust the histogram because the histogram tells us whether we captured all the tones or not. Make sense, Pat?
Yeah, so you want a histogram that's full of data?
Yes, exactly. And you want that histogram to start on the left and end on the right. And I don't care how many peaks and valleys it has, but I want it to hit the left corner and I want it to hit the right corner. If I did that, I captured all my possible colors.
Got it.
So
Got
like
it?
a histogram on the top, what is that telling you?
So that's telling you because there's a huge spike going up the y-axis on the right side. Because there's a spike going up there, that's telling me I've got overexposures in this picture. Because if there's a line going straight up the right axis, those are the pure white colors. That's how many pure white pixels with no detail you got.
Okay.
So anytime I've got to spike up that right axis, the colors leading up to that right axis are okay. Those are just whites. But anytime I've got any pixels going straight up that right side, that's where I blew it.
And if
So
it was
go, Pat, question.
if it was the other way around,
If it
On
was
the
the other
left.
way around, if it's not going all the way to the right side, then we might need to overexpose a little bit. Now, some of those early pictures you took where you balanced your light meter in the beginning of class, you might have photographed a lamp. And the lamp in this case will overexpose and it'll be blinking at you if you have your highlight indicator turned on. But don't worry about it because there's no way we can properly expose that lamp and still expose everything else. Okay. So for your homework assignment, you see that you've got a homework assignment that's due to me by next Tuesday evening, if you would, please. I give you a whole week because we're meeting on Wednesday morning, right? Yeah. So you have until next Tuesday afternoon to send these pictures to me. So in your homework assignment, what you are going to do is you are, and by the way, this is a screen like what we're looking for. So here's your picture right here, and here's your histogram right here, so we can see them all together. And then Pat on your camera, Clarissa and John on your cameras. If you spiked up the right on anything, you should also see that in your picture blinking at you. So it's called a highlight indicator. So in your homework assignment, what you're going to do is you are going to go outside, or if you want to do this inside, you're more than welcome to. You're going to set a little figurine or a little statue or something as close to your camera as you can focus. But you want the background to be 8, 10, 12, 15 feet away. The further your background can be, the better it's going to be. If you're going to do this outside, put your little figurine on a table or something, and then the back fence 15, 20 feet away.
Okay.
Put your camera on a tripod or put your camera on a stool, focus in as close as you can on that figurine, and then using the little chart that I gave you on your homework assignment, start at your 4.5. Pat, you get to start at your 2.8. You had a 2.8, didn't you, Pat?
Yes.
Yeah, because you don't have a 22. So start at your 2.8, Pat. Everybody else start at your 4.5, okay? And then you're going to
4.5.
start at 4.5, balance your light meter, fill in what your shutter speed was, take the picture. Move to 5.6 or your next f-stop, Pat. Balance your light meter, fill in what your shutter speed was, take the picture. If you did it right, all your pictures are going to look exactly alike. But what you're going to notice is your background is going to come more in focus as you change your f-stop. Then you're going to get a water hose or a fountain in your backyard or a sprinkler. But you know, a water hose is perfectly fine. You just want some water pouring out of it. If it's rainy and windy outside, feel free to use your kitchen faucet. Some people have done it even with their kitchen faucet, okay? And then you start at a fast shutter speed. Don't move the camera, rebalance your light meter, slower and slower and slower shutter speeds, take pictures over and over and over again. And then you're going to download those photographs and send them to me. I'll send you a link to my Dropbox, but if you have a Dropbox or a WeTransfer, feel free to send them to me that way. If you're used to sending photos in a different way, feel free to send them to me that way. I'll download them, I'll put them into the program for next week. We'll show them, we'll talk about them. And if you make any mistakes, it's okay. Go ahead and send those to me as well. But the key to a successful homework assignment is keep the subject stationary and keep your camera in the same position as well. That way we can notice as things change. Okay. If you have any questions in the meantime, I'm around. Email me. If you still can't find something on the back of your camera, email me, let me know. And then I'll look through your user manual and see if I can give you an answer. Okay. Otherwise, I will see you next week, Wednesday, same time, same place.
Okay.
Got it?
Yes, ma'am. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Everybody good? Oh, and I'm sharing the recording with you tomorrow. John, you good?
Yeah, the last item though on your, well, not right above the histogram, you have this topic RAW versus JPEG.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me cover that next time. I'll
Okay.
cover that one for you next time. Pat,
Okay.
good on questions?
Yeah.
Okay, super. So look for those things that we're looking for. Pat, you definitely have to turn off that bracket because that'll mess you up. And if you need any help, just let me know and I'll dig through your manual for you, okay? Don't worry about it bothering me. Okay, I will see you all next time. Thank you very much. And I will share the recording with you in a couple of hours.
All
Okay.
right, thank you, Kathy.
Great.
You are
Thanks, Kathy.
welcome. You are welcome. Thanks for being patient with each other. It takes a lot of patience with different cameras. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll see you next time, guys.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thanks. Bye-bye.